Welcome to class, everyone. Today's explainer is a diploma-level deep dive into the fascinating and, frankly, absolutely crucial world of strategic management. Let's be real. Organizations today are operating in environments that are just relentlessly competitive and constantly shifting. We're talking rapid technological advancements, globalization, ever-changing consumer preferences, and some pretty wild economic fluctuations. In a chaotic environment like that, you simply cannot rely on luck or short-term, knee-jerk decisions if you want to survive. You need a solid blueprint. And that is exactly what we're going to build together today.
Here is a quick look at our syllabus. We'll start with the strategy compass, move right through the management process, analyze business environments, set some SWOT and SMART goals, formulate the actual strategy, and then we'll wrap it all up with a Canadian real-world case study.
All right, Section 1, the strategy compass.
I really want you to think about this for a second. With tech advancing at literally lightning speed, consumer preferences shifting basically overnight, and economies bouncing all over the place, how do companies actually survive without just getting lucky? How do they stop just reacting to problems and instead proactively navigate their way to success?
Well, the answer is strategy formulation. Think of this as a highly systematic, deeply analytical process. It's the exact method an organization uses to decide where it wants to go, establish its goals, evaluate all the internal and external chaos, and decide how it's going to allocate its hard-earned resources. It gives a company a crystal-clear sense of purpose. When everyone, from managers to employees to investors, truly understands these strategic priorities, all their efforts become completely aligned.
Legendary management expert Michael Porter actually hits the nail on the head here. He says strategy formulation is the process of creating a unique and valuable position through a different set of activities. You see, it's not just about doing the same things a little bit better, it's about intentionally creating a truly unique competitive position that sets you completely apart from everyone else out there.
Moving right along to Section 2, the management process.
Strategy definitely isn't a one-and-done deal. It doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It's actually a four-stage, totally interconnected loop. First, you've got to scan the environment. Then you formulate the strategy, which is our main focus for today. Next, you actually have to execute or implement that strategy. And finally, you evaluate how well it worked. It's this continuous, never-ending loop of scanning, formulating, executing, and evaluating to make sure you're always improving.
But hey, before we can formulate a viable plan, we first need to get into the lab and run some diagnostics. That brings us to Section 3, analyzing the environment.
There's a really distinct divide we have to understand here. On one hand, you have your internal environment. These are the things going on inside the organization's walls: your human resources, financial capabilities, operational efficiency, and marketing strength. The good news? You can control these. On the flip side, we have the external environment. These are the massive market forces, macro trends, and industry shifts that you absolutely cannot control, but you absolutely must adapt to.
To make sense of that wild external macro environment, we use something called the PESTLE framework. This is an absolutely crucial tool. P is for political factors, like sudden new tax regulations. E is economic. Think about how soaring inflation quickly kills consumer spending. S is for social factors, like a growing fitness craze changing what people buy. T stands for technological innovations, like AI completely disrupting entire industries. The second E is environmental, covering things like climate change and sustainability. And finally, L is legal, like new labor laws that might bump up your operating costs. You have to scan all of these to see what's coming at you.
Now, when we want to analyze the specific competition in our industry, we zoom in a little bit using Porter's 5 forces model. This really helps you figure out your immediate competitive neighborhood. You're looking at the threat of new entrants, like is it super easy for a random startup to challenge you? Then there's the bargaining power of your suppliers and your buyers. You also look at the competitive rivalry among existing firms. And crucially, the threat of substitute products. A perfect example from our sources is how streaming services came in and essentially replaced cable television as a substitute.
Okay, so once the environment is fully scanned inside and out, we take all that data and consolidate it in Section 4, SWOT and SMART goals.
Let's bring this down to earth with a local coffee shop example. By taking their internal strengths, like maybe having killer customer service, and their internal weaknesses, like having barely any seating, and placing them right up against external opportunities, like a booming local coffee culture, and external threats, like a massive new competitor opening up across the street, well, suddenly the business gets a crystal-clear diagnostic of exactly where it stands in the market.
The whole point here is that a SWOT analysis naturally leads to setting goals. But you can't just throw your hands up and say, hey, we want to do better. Your goals have to be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So instead of a vague, let's sell more online, a SMART objective sounds like increase online sales by 20% within 12 months. It gives you a highly specific benchmark so you can actually evaluate your performance later.
With our environment analyzed and our SMART goals completely locked in, we can finally jump into Section 5, formulating the strategy. Organizations usually have a bunch of strategic options on the table, right? Things like market penetration, product development, or branching out into diversification. But before leadership actually pulls the trigger and selects a strategy, they have to run it through a rigorous 3-step checklist. Step 1, feasibility. Can we actually pull this off with our current money and staff? Step 2, suitability. Does this actually fit our big picture goals and leverage what we're good at? And step 3, acceptability. Are stakeholders, investors, and employees actually going to support this, or is there going to be massive resistance?
It is also absolutely vital to know what level you're strategizing for. Corporate-level strategy focuses on the big, overarching picture, like what businesses should we even be operating in? If a manufacturing company decides to buy a software startup, that's a corporate-level move. Business-level strategy, on the other hand, is all about how you're actually going to beat the competition within a specific industry. Are you going to win by offering rock-bottom prices, or by having the highest quality product?
All right, let's take all these academic frameworks and tie them together in Section 6, our Canadian real-world case study. Let's see what this blueprint looks like in action. I'd like to introduce you to Green Tech Solutions. Their mission, which is essentially why they wake up and exist every day, is to provide affordable, renewable energy products. Their vision, which is what they aspire to become down the road, is to be Canada's absolute leading renewable energy company. Every single strategy they formulate has to perfectly align with those two core statements.
When we look at their completed SWOT analysis, we see that internally, they have some massive strengths, like highly innovative technology and brilliant engineers. But their major weakness is that nobody really knows who they are. They have very limited brand recognition. Looking externally, they're facing the threat of increasing competition, sure, but they also identified a huge opportunity, brand new government incentives for green energy.
Using all that SWOT data, GreenTech's leadership formulated a highly specific, measurable objective. They didn't just casually say, let's grow this year. No. They set a SMART goal to capture 15% more market share over the next 3 years. This gives their entire workforce a precise, unified target to chase.
So, to hit that ambitious 15% goal, they evaluated their alternatives for feasibility, suitability, and acceptability. The formulated strategy they ultimately selected is this. They are going to expand into new provinces to capture those sweet government incentives, while heavily investing in digital marketing to finally cure their internal weakness of low brand recognition. It's brilliant because it perfectly aligns their internal strengths with external opportunities, turning all this business theory into a real, actionable roadmap for growth.
As we wrap up this explainer, one thing is abundantly clear. Poor planning simply leads to wasted resources and a lot of missed opportunities. The business environment never ever stops changing. New tech, fierce new competitors, and huge economic shifts are always right around the corner. But when you have a well-formulated strategy, you can turn all that chaos into a seriously powerful competitive advantage.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought. How will you use these analytical tools to formulate your own proactive strategic moves and write your own blueprint for survival? Thank you so much for watching this explainer. If you found this strategic deep dive helpful and want to keep mastering these topics with us, please make sure to like this and subscribe to the channel for more. We'll see you next time.